Dennis Mellen, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks, Dr. Westover. Appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much. And please call me John.
Okay.
I'm excited to have the conversation with you today. We're going to be focusing on this concept of energy vampires and what that means for teams and organizations and how leaders can drive a more positive workplace culture. As we get started, I wanted to share Dennis's bio with everybody. Dennis is a leader, motivator, mental performance mentor, and passionate athletic coach. Enthusiastic leadership and followership are his trademarks. He brings a high level of energy and passion to every group he engages, weaving personal anecdote and experiences with specific calls to action are key elements in his goal to bring education, inspiration, and entertainment to a variety of audiences. Dennis brings years of experience as a 28-year retired Alaska airline fleet captain, retired Air Force lieutenant colonel, and command pilot. His experiences consulting, teaching, and coaching include building and directing training programs, leading and directing operational teams, IOSA flight safety auditor, and developing new leadership from a unique perspective. These experiences provide insightful stories to connect his audience to the foundations for leading organizations, building relationships, connecting people, and engaging teams in their vision and purpose. The focus in his sessions is on helping each organization, team, and individual build more positive minds, teams, and cultures. With worldwide presentations in such places as Kenya, the Philippines, and Cape Verde, Dennis emphasizes how diverse views can lead to innovation and new ideas. Thank you so much, Dennis. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Before we launch on into the conversation, anything else you would like to share with listeners by way of background or personal context?
No, I'm liable to put everybody to sleep with all that on there. So,
Well, you have quite the career, quite the range of experiences. That's awesome, and I love to learn from people with diverse backgrounds. So I'm excited to have this dialogue with you today. As we get started, I thought first of all we could kind of set the table in terms of why it's important for leaders to drive positive cultures and some of the things they can do to start developing a sustainable positive culture.
well, just like in athletics, it's important to be in the moment, be where your feet are planted, so that and using your eyes to focus on what's in front of you. The importance of being positive. We're going to have events come at us all the time. We have no control over those events, but our reaction to those events is what can influence the outcome. If we do nothing, we're going to let the event drive the outcome. If at best we're going to influence, and hopefully we'll have a considerable amount of influence. And if we're looking at the future, and we're looking at it with fear, or we can look at it with some faith that things are going to work out. If it hasn't happened yet, why would we pick fear? Let's see what we can positively do to influence that outcome. So that's the gist of what I look at as positive leadership.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it approaches leadership from an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity or limitations mindset. Of course, we're going to have limitations. Of course, we're going to have challenges and roadblocks in our way as we're trying to help our team be successful, as we're trying to help our organization meet its objectives. But it all comes back to kind of our mental model and our attitude and how we approach those challenges in determining really what we're going to do in responding to them. And most organizations, and this, not to point fingers or to pass blame or fault on any specific individual, but just the nature of the way organizations are set up. They're set up and bureaucracies exist to maintain the status quo and to perpetuate the existence of current, processes and procedures, right? And inevitably, though, things change. And so organizations by their nature are designed to not change, yet we're in a world where we have to constantly be changing. And so in my experience, many organizations simply aren't well equipped culturally to deal with the ever existing need for pivoting and change and adaptation. And so when the roadblocks emerge, there's a lot of of just trying to figure out how can we make what we've always done work for the future, instead of re-examining what have we done in the past, what can we change, what what policies, practices, and procedures will no longer serve us moving into the future, and ultimately how can we make sure that we're adjusting to adapt to the new ever-changing world around us. And I think what you just said, if we have that kind of a mindset, that will give us a better chance of making those kind of necessary adjustments, because we have an abundance attitude, we have a good positive attitude. But when we have a more scarcity or limited kind of fixed mindset, we're going to just beat our heads up against the wall with frustration every time we come about these different challenges.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring it up that way, because one of the things that I look at, and in fact, it's going to be the subject of my next book, is athletic teams, high school and college in particular. Imagine this, every year they lose their senior leadership. How does that impact the culture? And how do you perpetuate a good culture or create a better culture within a team like that? And it applies to, imagine the cultural change that happened after Steve Jobs left Apple and Tim Cook took over. I mean, they're two different leadership styles, so the culture is going to change slightly. But how do you keep it fresh, keep it leaning forward, keep it moving towards the outcomes that you're looking for? And that's the very essence of positive leadership, is creating that culture where you're constantly developing the growth mindset, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. So you talked a little bit about what positive leadership is, why it matters. What are some specific things that leaders can do to just try to drive those positive cultures?
Well, I think one of the keys is establishing great communications, where we feel where I can reveal some vulnerability to John, and John can reveal some vulnerability to Dennis, but also it creates that trust environment where we can exchange ideas freely. And once we have that communication set, it leads right into connecting with everyone, and then goes on to gaining commitment and showing that you care. And once you have that culture established, or you're trying to perpetuate it or improve it in a continuous improvement process, then success should follow along with that. It's a step-by-step process. You can't take care of everything all at once, but it starts with being positive within yourself, influencing those around you, and those influencers move on to the rest of the team or the rest of the company. And I think that's my concept about being a bean. If you have a company, you're in an environment that's boiling and roiling and steam's coming and everything. If you're that bean that can go in there and change that ordinary water into gourmet coffee, that's the way you influence the team's performance, influence the success of the team, and therefore the company or the world, if we're looking at a macro level.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it really is. I mean, changing organizational culture is challenging. So, and culture emerges naturally anytime you get two or more people together. And so, whether we like it or not, there will be a culture that emerges within our team, within our organization. The question is, are we being reactionary to a culture that just bubbles up organically, or are we being strategic and purposeful about the type of culture we want within our organization? So the ideal scenario is you have a leader who, whether it's the CEO of a large corporation or a leader, a manager over a small team, that leader, hopefully from the very beginning, they start to put the time in and set the stage, the foundation for the type of culture they want within their team. And then they, in a sustainable way, they give continual attention to it so they can establish and maintain that kind of desired culture. And hopefully it's a really positive, psychologically safe and empowering type of culture that will help everyone to thrive. But we also find situations where either it's a new leader coming into an organization where there's a really unhealthy culture, or a leader, just, we all learn and grow as we go. And so someone who finds themselves in a leadership role, they don't really know what they're doing. There's kind of an unhealthy culture that develops. And over time, they start to realize what they need to do differently. Now they want to change it in a more healthy direction. And it's always more challenging when
Yeah.
you're trying to address it that way post hoc after the fact, as opposed to starting it from the beginning. It is possible. It's just going to take longer. It's going to take more concerted effort and more attention and resources to shift and change an already unhealthy, difficult, and negative culture to a more positive one.
Yeah, it's the whole concept is really connecting the culture with the vision, and it starts from the top, repeating the vision of the company, what we're trying to accomplish here, what our purpose is. If you want to get into the Simon Sinek type stuff, knowing your purpose, where you fit in, knowing the purpose of the team, knowing the purpose of the company, and knowing the purpose of where you fit in the whole environment of business and entertainment, or whatever we're dealing with, the nonprofit, where you fit into that process, connecting the people with or connecting the culture with the vision.
Yeah, absolutely. Connecting to the vision, the mission, and overall having alignment between team members' purpose and what drives them with the organization's vision and purpose, I think is really, really important to having that positive type of environment and having a healthy organization driving towards really exceptional types of results. So go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to add one little idea here, and it comes from history. If you look back at the Great London Fire in 1666, where London was basically burnt to the ground, there's an architect, Christopher Wren, that was charged with redesigning St. Paul's Cathedral, and he was getting out talking with the workers at the site. He went up to a bricklayer and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Well, I'm building a wall." He goes up to the second bricklayer. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I'm making money so I can feed my family." He goes up to the third bricklayer and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm building a cathedral, and it's going to house 1,800 parishioners on Sunday services, and during the week it's going to house homeless people. That's what I'm doing." Now, which of those guys is connected with the vision? Obviously, the cathedral builder, and that's the essence of being a leader. How do we create more cathedral builders?
I really like that. I like that a lot. So I know one of the things you focus on in your work is this idea of energy vampires. I think that's a really fun way to describe it. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by that, and then how can leaders deal with these energy vampires on your team?
Well, it's interesting. I can't claim it as my own. That's a John Gordon actual book that he has out called the Energy Bus, and in it he talks about energy vampires. And we all know those people that they walk into a meeting and they just suck the energy out of the meeting. And what do we do as leaders to deal with those type of people? Well, we can convert them. We can get them to hush up completely, or we have to get rid of them. And there's various stages of in between. But what we really want to do is convert them into positive energy people. The Navy SEALs have a thing. Oh, hey, we're surrounded by the enemy and they're shooting us. We're running out of ammunition. And they have a acronym. They say DWI, not for driving while intoxicated, but deal with it. There's nothing else that you can do. We're running out of ammunition. We're surrounded by the enemy. Let's just deal with it. Keep going until we cannot do. Well, in their case, they'd be dead because they stop. But the thing that needs to be emphasized with energy vampires is it's not dire straits. We have to survive. We have to continue. We have to solve this problem. We can't let it overwhelm us. So learning how to deal with the energy vampires is important.
And what are some of the ways that you work with when you're coaching or consulting? How do you work with leaders and point them, towards how to deal with energy vampires?
Well, there's several different ways, but most of the time it ends up being counseling, and we talk about establishing a no complaining rule. In other words, mindless complaining just is part of the energy vampire strategy. Mindless complaining is just, we're complaining about this, we have to do this, we have to do that. One way of changing that around is, if they're going to have a complaint, because complaints can be good, but you have to offer a solution with it, so that we cut out this mindless complaining. So that's one of the essential elements of it. The other we've already alluded to earlier with counseling and or ultimately removing someone. Sometimes they end up removing themselves. I know there's a story that's told about somebody coming into their boss and said, "This place is just too positive for me. I can't work here anymore." Okay, see ya.
That's the easy solution,
self-elimination.
right?
Yeah.
If they choose to leave. But it is true. I mean, people want alignment with the type of culture that seems to fit with them, and that goes both ways. I mean, that I don't want to. I see myself as an optimist. I'm a realist, but I'm also an optimist, and I want to try to focus on positive and moving things forward in a positive direction. And I don't want to be on a team with just perpetual complainers and just lots of negativity. So I'm going to select into more positive environments. The same is true, though, the opposite direction. People who are always negative often don't like being around incessantly positive people, and they find it annoying. So perhaps they self-select out too. And that's actually probably the easiest outcome for a leader, because then you don't have to deal with the coaching and the mentoring and trying to help someone shift their mindset.
But being positive isn't, like I can be very negative at times too. Also, and it's important to understand that it's not a Pollyanna type of outlook. What it is when you recognize that you're going that direction, have some tools in your toolkit that allow you to change your perspective. I noticed in the background you have a map of Australia. Imagine what the perspective of an Australian is when we talk about the top of the world. I mean, same world, but we're looking at with Australia in the upper left-hand corner instead of the United States. And that's a different perspective of the same world. And by having that perspective, you can change or influence the outcome of something. So that's what I like to think that I do as a one-on-one coach, is provide some tools to help that person change their perspective. You're going to get negative. Bad things are going to happen. But how do we do what's the Japanese adage of fall down 7 times, get up 8?
Yeah.
That's the positive outlook. Doesn't mean that when we fell down, we went, "Oh, well, this is so nice." I mean, it's got to be how do I recover from that, so that I can influence the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's not a pure Pollyannish type of an approach. We have to be realistic, and we have to understand that we will face obstacles and challenges. We can't just, put our heads in the sand and pretend like everything's wonderful when it's not. There are dysfunctional systems. There are things that need to be disrupted. We can improve, and that necessarily means we have to look for opportunities where things aren't working, recognize them, and then we can work towards improvement. But to the point that you made earlier, I think one of the biggest distinctions that I see is someone who's just complaining because they're an incessant complainer. They're just incessantly negative, and they suck the energy out of a room, and people don't really like being around them, versus The person who is willing to speak up and speak out, who's willing to acknowledge the problems, but they are also willing to tackle them, and they're willing to offer solutions, and they're willing to work towards and put in the hard work of addressing the challenges that they see. And that is the true positive kind of culture and climate that I see, that I want to aspire to in my own organizations.
Right, and that's an important perspective on how to move forward, and that's what needs to be put in people's mind. I worked at an airline at one point that went bankrupt, and as the cutbacks started going, about every third cubicle was empty. So everybody is hunkered down in their silos, and you could see that basically the communications had stopped, and there were rivalries and turf wars, and no, we don't want to commit this, we don't want to commit that. And that starts from the top. If you're under the gun, your company's not doing well, how do you maintain the positive attitude to move hey, we're moving forward one step at a time. We'll get back to where we were, and we'll be better than we were when this happened to us. And I'm sure that since the pandemic, there's literally thousands of companies that are in that same boat. Where do I pivot to now? How do I survive? And I like to use the story. My brother-in-law is a professional musician. He plays violin, and he does some gigs, and he does teaching, and he has some orchestra work that he does. But again, the pandemic hit. What do I do now? Well, he didn't throw his hands up. He went, what tools I have? What's in my repertoire? And I was talking to him one day, and he had just finished a lesson on Zoom with 5 violin students over in Sweden. So imagine that. Here's a musician that pivoted so that he could still maintain. I just have to admire him because I don't know if I would have done, because it would have been one of those, what do I do now?
Yeah.
I have to admire the pivot, and that's what companies are looking at right now: is how do I pivot to survive and become better than we were.
Yeah, I love it. Great example. Well, Dennis, it has been a real pleasure talking with you. The time has flown by. I see we're nearing the end of our time together. Before we close, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Okay. Well, you can contact me at www.being, and I think, no, I don't have it on any of the logos, it looks like, but beabeing.net. And on there is descriptions of the training that I do and one-on-one coaching that I do. And I also have a book out called Takes More Than Heart, changing the journey's challenges into opportunities. And that would be takesmorethanheart.com. The final thing you said, final note to summary of today, I think the most important part is to be the being that has that influence that changes those people around you, just like a bean would in boiling water, changing it into gourmet coffee. Be the influencer, transform the team, whether you're a follower or a leader, either direction. You need to be the influencer that moves everybody forward, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to affect the outcome, is by our response to things.
I love it. Well, thank you, Dennis. It has been a real pleasure talking with you today. I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Dennis can do for you and your organization. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.